Hello, everyone. For those of you who are joining us today, welcome to the Level Up Hort webinar, how to make more margin in your business. My name is Steph Carstairs. I'm the project manager for the Level Up Hort program. For those of you who aren't familiar with Level Up Hort, it's a Hort Innovation funded project using vegetable and onion levies with support from the Australian government. And Plan Farm and RMCG collaborate on this 5-year project. We're now heading into year 4 of the 5-year project. The purpose of today's webinar is to turn insights from the work that we do with vegetable and onion growers around Australia into action. It's not business advice, as each business is different, and that's the role of our consulting work, to work at a deeper level with individual businesses. But we would like to demonstrate to you today how the learnings and profit levers that we've identified through this work in the project can be applied to your business. If you're not a vegetable grower, that's okay. The principles still apply to your business. Our speakers today are Thea Walker from Plan Farm and Jake Gaudian from RMCG. They're both horticultural consultants, farm management consultants. And we also have Paul Omaday, Director of Horticulture at Plan Farm, joining us. The format of the webinar will be Thea and Jake presenting for about 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. Some of you already have submitted questions when you registered. Thank you. And you can submit questions via the chat or the Q&A button at the top of your screen at any time throughout the webinar. During the webinar, we may be able to see who's asked a question in the chat box. However, I will not read your name out so that it will not go into the recording. And we'll do our best to get to all of your questions today. Any that we don't, we'll contact you afterwards via email. Attendees will be all muted today to reduce any noise interference. If we have any technical issues and that doesn't happen, please make sure that your microphone is turned off at the top of your screen. And so that you're all aware, this will be recorded and we will upload the recording to the Level Up Hort website after today. So without further ado, let's get started. Over to you, Thea.
Righto. Thank you, Steph. So why are we here today? What you can see currently on the screen is an excerpt from our 2025 National Vegetable and Onion Benchmarks. And it's looking at the exact same group of businesses and their performance over the last 3 years. So on the left-hand side, we have EBIT, which is earnings before interest and tax, and lease, which is your operating profit. And then on the right-hand side, our return on assets managed. And what these are showing is that these businesses are consistently performing below the target level of 15% EBIT margin, which is what we recommend for vegetable growers across Australia. And profitability is generally declining. So the question is, if our operating environment is becoming more difficult, noting that this is pre-conflict as well, can we afford to keep managing our business the same way that we've always been managing them? The answer to that is probably not, which is why you're all here today. So we know the challenges facing vegetable growers right now: rising input costs, labour challenges, market pressure, weather uncertainty, and this need for constant decision making. For many businesses, it probably feels like the pressure just keeps on increasing, like you're being squeezed from both sides. And you probably feel like you're working harder than ever, and you're just wondering why the business isn't creating the freedom or the reward that it should be. And the reality is that these challenges are real. We're not going to ignore them today. But no one can control the market prices. No one can control the cost of inputs, and no one can control the weather. So imagine 10 businesses all growing the exact same crop, all selling into the exact same market. Are all of them going to make the exact same profit? Unlikely. So today's webinar isn't about pretending that these challenges don't exist. Instead, it's about asking the question that if we're all facing these same challenges, why is it that some businesses continue to outperform others? So how much influence do you have over your own business? In this blue list here, you can see a list of things that we can't control: weather, markets, input prices, policy changes, interest rates, and there's probably more to that as well. However, what about the things we can influence? Our planning, cost management, labour productivity, timing decisions, marketing decisions, business systems, information quality, and there's probably a lot more to that list too. Which group do you think that you've spent most of your mental energy over the last 6 months? In the blue group, things that you can't control necessarily, or in the green, things that we can actually influence? And the key to running a profitable business, the objective shouldn't be to control the uncontrollable, the blue things. Instead, it should be to become exceptional at the things that we actually still have influence on, the list in green. And if you think about it, if every important variable in our business was controlled by somebody else or something else, such as the weather or the markets, then no farming business would ever outperform the other. So the growers that we work with, that Jake and I work with, they consistently perform, not because they have fewer challenges, but because they're the ones that are very clear about where they can have influence in their business. I'm going to throw it to Jake. He's one of our consultants on the ground. Jake, you're working with growers every week. What are some of the struggles that you're seeing that they're having at the moment, or where are they getting stuck in their business?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting past 3 or 4 months. I'm based in Tasmania, so I work with Tasmanian growers, and in Tassie, a lot of growers grow a lot of different things. Some of them, for instance, people might have 5 or 6 different crops in the ground at one time, potentially more. That could be just vegetable crops, and then there could be other non-vegetable crops too. And I guess at the moment with the conflict, whilst that's settled down somewhat, input costs are changing so rapidly. And I think the general consensus is on the ground that, there's been a lot of people feeling overwhelmed, and I guess that level of overwhelm kind of leaving from that uncertainty leading to difficulty making decisions. I think most growers that I work with are pretty pragmatic at the moment and kind of understand that they can't control what is happening globally. But it's interesting, and because the businesses are so diversified in Tassie in terms of the number of different crops, it's really hard for growers to be across how the changes in cost of inputs are actually impacting their bottom line. And so I think where potentially, some are kind of getting stuck is, just really understanding how the changes are actually impacting their business and bottom line. And so that's something that we try to help with through this program, is try and bring a bit of sense of clarity to the data and help businesses plan for the future, based on that data. And I guess it's pretty cliche, but knowing your numbers is probably the number one thing you can do to actually plan moving forward with greater certainty.
Yeah, that's right. And if you look back on these boxes again, a lot of people, when it's totally relatable, might look at this list and think, how do I change the market? What we really want to encourage you today is to come out of this and think, rather than focusing on the blue things, while they're still important, to come away and say instead, where have I actually been underestimating my own influence in my business? Righto. So what are the best operators doing differently? When you think of the best grower you know, what makes them different? What are they doing that makes them stand out? We know from the literature and our on-ground advisory that great operators, they seek information, both inside and outside of their business. They're making strategic and more timely decisions. They review their results honestly. They buy an expertise to help support better decision-making in their business. They build strong relationships and alliances with banks and suppliers. They adapt quickly. They stay curious. They focus on their profit drivers. And most importantly, they have a willingness to improve. Jake, what are some of the standout traits that you see with the great operators that you're working with?
I guess I'd preface it by saying that, even the good and great operators can have poor years, and that can be based on a lot of things outside of their control with poor weather. I guess what I've probably seen with the growers that I work with, who are probably more consistently making good profits, it's all of those things that you've mentioned there, Thea. I think it's definitely an openness to seeking new information and really having a good sense of where they stand currently and focusing on incremental improvements. It's really not about any kind of silver bullet, one thing. I think it's about the ones who have a really good base of knowing their numbers. They kind of know almost off the top of their head their cost of production for each crop, for each enterprise, and they update that regularly. Based on that, they know what their break even is. And so I think it's having that knowledge updated regularly so that growers can, I guess, think at the margin. And so by that, I mean, understand the marginal cost or marginal benefit of any one decision that they make regularly. As growers do, there's, hundreds of different decisions that they're making every day. But if you have that base, the best growers probably have that base of understanding of where they sit so that they're able to, make those smaller decisions quicker and probably more effectively too. And I guess an example of that is like it's kind of probably got one particular grower who, I can almost ask them about their specific crop that they focus on, and they'll be able to tell me the specific cost if they have to do another chemical pass over their crop, and that might include, the actual wear and tear cost of the machinery, the depreciation might include the cost of the fuel, the cost of the spray as well, and so they kind of know that for pretty much every crop that they do, and they then make those decisions about, well, this is how much it's going to cost me to do that extra spray. Is that actually going to provide me with the financial benefit in doing it? It's all of them, but I think it really starts with really good deep understanding of your numbers for each enterprise that you're running.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a bit of a mindset thing as well. So an average operator or someone who's not a great operator might think or say, I don't think I can achieve that. Whereas a great operator, and where we want to encourage you all to start thinking, is how do we achieve that? How do we actually get there? So it's becoming more curious and having that time to actually explore where are the opportunities to improve in your business. So what you can see here is the key results from the National Vegetable and Onion Benchmarking Program or report. And we have the most profitable businesses compared with the average businesses. And what I want to do is draw your attention to the third line, operating profit per hectare. Now we understand that there are difficult conditions at the moment. And yet, if you look at these results here, there continues to be profitable businesses in the vegetable and onion industry. Now, they aren't necessarily the highest income growers. There's some down there as low as 30 or 40K income. And there is no pattern when it comes to crop type, region or scale. So if that's the case, and these businesses are operating under similar conditions to all the other growers, how do we explain this gap? This gap where the most profitable growers are generating 4 times more profit, than the rest of the growers in Australia. The answer lies in how effectively they convert their land, water, labour and other resources into income, into revenue, and are able to maintain a healthy margin while doing so. If you look at the second line there as well, what you can see with vegetable costs is that they're actually spending more per hectare than the industry average. So the difference there is just that they are way more effective at converting those costs into even more income, and that helps build a great margin. How do they do this? It's usually not one big decision that they make either. It's a cumulative effect of multiple good decisions across their business. Jake, when you see growers move or shift from the average to the most profitable group, is there any key things that you see actually drive that shift?
It's definitely not any one thing that I can put my finger on. And I guess just back to this data, like what we're seeing is there's a huge range of outcomes with businesses in terms of profitability. So most profitable group is the average of the top 25%, but we also do group it in the report by the average of the bottom 25% too. And the average of the bottom 25% are making a loss. And so there's a huge variation in outcomes by industry, and some of that might be seasonal variation. But I think it's it's important to note the, I guess, range of outcomes within the data set that we've got. I guess in terms of it's probably in terms of like what we're seeing as characteristics as of the most profitable group, is that generally speaking, they kind of own their focus on the one or two key crop lines that are that they know make them money, and kind of, well, essentially focus their efforts accordingly. So that was been a real key theme of the top 25% group this year. They, I guess, know what makes them money in terms of their crop and build their production system or even their rotations around it. And we see that in Tassie. There's a few growers who have their key crops, and basically they might grow that crop once every 5 or 7 years. And in the other years of the rotation, they really grow complementary crops that may leave some cash on the table in 1 year in that paddock, but they're aiming to get a better return from their key cash crop in that year, if that makes sense. So it's I guess knowing what makes you profit and focusing your efforts accordingly on what's actually going to give the most bang for buck. And I guess building on that, it really is it's backed by the growers who, they do know their numbers and can make those tweaks accordingly. It is a number of incremental gains that growers are using. And I think, for mine, some of it has also been through benchmarking, kind of identifying what areas of their business they could tweak to be able to improve their profitability. So one specific example is a grower who they're actually growing quite well and getting good yields, and their costs were reasonably in line with the benchmark data. However, scale was identified as an issue, and that really showed up through the data. And so through that, this is a year or so ago now, that's been a big focus of this particular grower to, increase their scale, because they were actually doing a good job, but it's just about producing more and doing more of what they're doing. So there's no one answer in terms of that shift from average to most profitable, but it does start with identifying, what are your 1 to 2 key crops and how are they making you money, and what can you tweak with them to be more efficient, both in terms of managing costs, but converting that into saleable yield and income.
Yeah, and they're probably more strategic in their mindset as well, where instead of thinking, how do I cut costs in my business, their attitude is, how do I get a better return from every dollar that I actually spend as well.
Yep.
So if you want to increase the margin in your own business, where should we look? So we're just going to run through a really quick example here. We've got Frankie's Farm, who's generating an income of $5 million, and it's costing them $4.85 to do it. So they have a profit of 150K, which is a profit margin of 3%. Let's say we want to aim to improve our total margin by 10%. So this will get us up to 13%, still under, but close to the target of 15. So definitely achievable. How do we do it? Where should we start looking for that 10%? Here's a list of key profit drivers that will help us get there. So the first one, better use and timing of inputs. This is about getting more value from every dollar that you spend in your business and being able to grow your saleable yield. Having better labour efficiency, so being able to have greater output from the same team, better productivity. Better crop mix decisions, being able to generate more of what actually generates profit. Better business information. Knowing your numbers gives you greater confidence and evidence when you're going into bargaining, and greater bargaining power when you're going into those price negotiations. And overall, better decision-making confidence. So being able to make those decisions earlier and with more certainty. And there's no silver bullet. It's not going to be one area of these that's going to change your business. Rather, it's going to be a cumulative effect of small shifts across each of those areas, or multiple areas of these. The challenge, though, is identifying which of these shifts is going to have the greatest impact on your profit. And your focus should be on the levers that have the greatest ability to influence profitability. So what I've done is I've broken that 4.85 million into these key cost categories. Now, in your own business, you'd probably break them right down to the fertilizer, freight, packaging level. But for simplicity, if this is your business, where are we looking? Where would you start? Which of these costs are actually going to have the greatest impact or influence on your profit? And usually what it's going to be is the biggest cost in your business. So in this particular example, labour is the one that stands out, but it might be different for any business. It's probably commonly going to be labour for horticulture. What we can see is $1.75 million, which equates to 35% of our income. So if we're currently spending $1.75 million, how do we actually get a better return off that investment? So in our business, what we're wanting to achieve is greater output from the same team. So we've got 13 FTEs who are currently performing, generating us 10K per profit. Now, over the next 2 to 3 years, let's say, you worked through all of these small management improvements. So you worked to get better workflow, better planning, better communication, less waiting, less rework because of mistakes, and better supervision all over. If you make small improvements in each of these areas over the next 2 to 3 years, in this example business, we've actually increased our profit per FTE up to 27 or close to 30K per staff member without actually increasing the number of workers we have or decreasing. So with the same amount of staff, we've been able to achieve greater output. The impact of this would be increasing our profit from 150K to 400, which is an increase of 5% to our profit margin. How it's achieved? Well, there's probably income gains from better saleable yield or quality because we have less rework, better workflow as well. And these are also leading to potentially a cost saving where you have less waiting around, so you're not paying staff for walking as far, for example.
I'll just jump in, Thea. Like this is, I think that 35% labour costs as percentage of income is basically exactly what the average in the benchmark report is. And so labour has been a pretty big focus on, I guess, identifying more data from producers through this project too. So if that's of interest to you, there are more in-depth graphs this year which actually segments where that labour data is actually, or where that labour is actually being spent in the business. So growing, harvesting, post-harvest as well. And this is, something that we're seeing that is, being such a huge cost for many vegetable producers, not all, but many, depending on what kind of crops they're in. This is a really big kind of component of the program too.
Mm. And this number, you're probably looking at this and thinking, gee, that jump from 150K to 400K is a big jump. I don't have one problem that's worth 250K in my business. And that's true for most businesses. But what you might have is several really small problems that you probably didn't even realize were problems. They were just normal for your business. And so what we see with the most profitable growers or with really great performers is they're actually always looking for that extra 1%. Where are those hidden things that they didn't actually realize were there? And as well, when we talk about productivity, it's labour productivity, it's not always about making your staff actually work harder as well. It's also about building a business that doesn't rely on one person. So being able to create greater freedom for you as the owner, because generally in most businesses, without realising, most owners are the bottleneck in their own business. So every decision, problem, question has to come back through them. So if you have greater systems, greater teams, better communication, generally the owner has that freedom to actually be able to step back and actually create impact in the areas, or create influence, in the areas where they actually have greater impact. Okay. In addition as well, when you focus when you shift your focus from one of reducing costs to one of maximising income generation, your margin begins to widen. So on the left, we can see our current position where we had 3% profit margin, 150K profit. Now, if you remember a few slides ago, we said that we want to get to a 10% increase in our total margin up to 13%. So if we went to achieve 13% profit margin with the same income just by cutting costs, we'd get 650K of profit. If we did the same with keeping the same costs and focusing on driving income, it'll leave us with 725k of profit. Now, they're both two total extremes and they're probably unlikely to happen. The appropriate ratio is going to be somewhere in between there, because there generally is going to be some costs that you will have to manage in your business. And this is where benchmarking comes in really useful, being able to see where you're actually overspending compared to other businesses. But in addition, there's a lot of opportunity where you can actually may be able to spend more, but it's going to have a better impact on your income and your profits, which is what we see with the better operators a few slides back. So they are spending more in their costs, but their ability to generate more income off that is greater. And as you can see, when your focus shifts to spending more, your profit actually is a lot larger than if you're just cutting costs.
I can probably jump in with an example here, Thea. I have a grower down here in Tassie, and obviously this is a confidential program, so I won't be able to mention many details, but essentially through the benchmarking program and process, they identified that their labour costs as percentage of income was above the average nationally. And so it kind of became a bit of a discussion on, well, is it that you're not managing labour effectively in terms of there's potentially some improvements in the systems or in management of labour to improve that in terms of in harvesting or in the packing shed. And so there's no real one solution here. And in this kind of case, it was probably a mix of, well, actually it was a yield issue that's causing the labour efficiency to be higher because they weren't able to get the yield off that same amount of labour. Obviously, if you're having a good growing season, you're going to be able to pick more efficiently and, potentially pack more efficiently too. And so I guess what the value of the program is that, we really try to, through exploring the numbers, dig deep into the factors that are contributing to those numbers. We're not just focusing on, oh, you're spending too much on labour, you need to cut that. It really is, I guess, the benefit of having one-on-one kind of meetings to discuss the data is to really do that deep dive into, well, how can you improve this? And I guess in this situation, we explored some differences in harvesting technologies to improve that, and kind of discussed, well, is the capital outlay on that going to be worth the potential labour savings as well? So, yeah, I guess what I'm saying there is trying to back up Thea's point that it's not just about cutting costs, or it's not just about trying to improve income from it. We really try and take we understand their production systems are really complex, and we really try to work through that with growers to look at what solutions might be suitable for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the businesses that are improving their margins, they're not necessarily the ones that are actually just out there working the hardest. They're the ones that are focusing their efforts on the things in their business that create the greatest return for them. And it's not about focusing on the markets per se or the weather, not that they're not important, and they're definitely there, but it's about understanding and focusing on where you actually still have influence in your business, what those levers are that influence profitability. Is there any other examples you have, Jake, specifically around those profitability levers where you're actually seeing growers putting them into practice?
Yeah, it's interesting one. In Tassie, there's a lot more processing crops, and so there's probably a few less potentially levers that growers can pull in those instances. They're a bit more that you're less in control of your end market, I suppose. But one of some of the main ones we kind of look into are, contracting costs, and that decision about whether to outsource some parts of the production system in terms of harvesting versus actually doing that internally, and weighing up that decision. That is, something that it's very grower specific about whether that's a decision that, in terms of insourcing some of that and purchasing the equipment to be able to do, to manage more of the production system internally. That is one kind of lever that we do focus on and discuss with growers. And benchmarking enables people to kind of look, well, my contracting costs are a lot higher than the average. what can I do about this? Is it worth doing, or is it actually a cost that is good for my business? That's one specific example there. Yeah, I think, and a couple of the other ones is that we kind of go into there is looking into alternative machinery and other and kind of understanding, the plant repairs are really expensive, and so for instance, that decision to purchase new machinery or whether to kind of manage the existing machinery and unpack some of the pros and cons of doing that. So yeah, there are a few examples of kind of where we would focus, but it largely stems from focusing on maximizing yield and income from those costs rather than, what can you cut?
Yeah, for sure. And it's also interesting as well when you think about high performance athletes around the world. So if you think of Olympic athletes or the best tennis players in the world or entire sporting teams, they all have got these entire coaching departments. And it's not because they're bad at what they do or because they don't know enough, but it's because there's always something, or there's always something that they can see from that, somebody can see from the outside that you might not necessarily be able to see, or that they might not necessarily be able to see. And so business isn't that different. Essentially, the better you become, often, the harder it can be to see your own blind spots. So the high-performing businesses, they're always looking for ways to improve. They're always looking for that next 1%. And it's not because they'll ever get to perfect, but because there's always another level up to go. And Chris Webb summarised it perfect at Hort Connections, if any of you were there, where he said, perfection isn't something you ever achieve, but you can always strive towards it. So what we see is that the businesses that are continually improving, that we work with, they're the ones that not only stay profitable, but they are long-term resilient, and most importantly, they're enjoyable to run for the owners. All right. Before we finish, I'd like to think about your own business for a moment, or your own margin. If you can improve one thing in your business by 10% next season, what would it be? And not your entire business, just in one section of your business. Maybe it's labour productivity or saleable yield. Maybe it's your crop mix, your input efficiency, your marketing, your business systems. And the second question is, how confident are you that this is truly the biggest opportunity in your business? And if you're not completely sure, that's okay, because most business improvement starts with gaining clarity. Before you decide how to improve, you first need to understand where you are today and which opportunities are going to give you the greatest impact in getting you where you want to go. So today's webinar wasn't about giving everyone the same answer, because everyone's business is different. The real challenge, though, is understanding where in your business the greatest opportunity sits. So that's exactly why we're going to be running a series of roadshow workshops across Australia from August to October this year. And we're going to be taking growers through the practical side of improvement. So helping you actually identify what are those levers that influence profitability, and how can you do small improvements in each of those areas, and how those small improvements are actually going to make a significant difference to your business performance. So if you're a grower, or if you know a grower who would actually like to know their current position, where they are today, and be able to identify those levers that are going to help them get to where they want to go and have the greatest potential to influence their profitability, we do invite you to reach out. And then once you know those profit levers, we'd encourage you to come along to those roadshow workshops and put it into practice. So both the roadshow and the Level Up Hort program are free for vegetable growers, and information on both of those can be found on the Level Up Hort website. So at the beginning of the webinar, we asked the question, if we're all facing the same challenges, why is it that some businesses continue to outperform others? And it's not because they have better season, or that they have fewer challenges, or that they have more control in their business. But it's because they've become really clear about where exactly they can have influence. So they know their numbers, because that's what helps them see where the opportunities are. They make better decisions because they're focusing on evidence, not just assumptions or gut feel. And they build better systems, because that's how small improvements become consistent results. And over time, those small improvements compound into stronger margins. So the opportunity isn't in working harder. The opportunity is in seeing your business differently. And once you do, you start asking better questions, you make better decisions, and you focus your efforts on where it actually creates the greatest return. Over time, that's where we see that better margins are coming from. So better margins aren't found, they are created. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Thea and Jake. That was excellent, very insightful. We have a couple of questions here, which I will read out. And if anyone else has a question, please pop it in the Q&A box. The first question being, and this is an interesting question, the most profitable businesses also have higher costs per hectare. How do we distinguish productive investment from unnecessary cost? Who would like to take that question?
Go, Jay.
It's a good one. Well, I mean, you really have to understand the business. It's pretty hard to look at the averages and make a comment like that. But I guess that's what just reiterate that that's what we do try and do with each business. We really do work through their costs of production quite methodically, and the benchmark report does give answers, or not answers, it gives comparisons on a per hectare basis to the average nationally, to the most profitable growers and to the least profitable growers, also to the similar growers in the state. And I guess that's how we would unpack that through the program. But yeah, it is a good question.
And also add as well, the understanding your business from a percentage as cost as a percentage of income perspective as well really helps, because if you're comparing that with the dollars, then that's actually showing you how effectively those dollars are being converted into income. So you might have a really high spend in one area, but if it's not being converted into income, it'll often be show up there.
Thank you. Paul, did you have anything to add on that one? Because it's a great question.
Yeah, and Jake touched on it. I think this is the huge benefit of benchmarking, isn't it? It gives you that baseline, which I think that's the project is the benchmarking is the actual outcome. What's actually the key in the project is the one-on-one intensive analysis that consultants like Jake and Thea have been doing with clients and being able to dive into the numbers. So one of the benefits of having such a large number of consultants in Australia is that we get to see different businesses, and while confidence in those businesses is absolutely key, we can say with confidence that, for example, fertiliser costs in that type of crop is high. So therefore, that's the distinguishing fact, I think, that you're asking, is that if we know and we can see that from a consulting perspective, and I've seen many businesses and say, well, that fertiliser seems high, is it the type of fertiliser or whatever it is about that? That's the unnecessary, the cost that's actually making productive movements in. A very good question.
Thank you. There was another question here. We know that labour is a major cost for vegetable industries. What are the more successful businesses doing differently with labour?
Yeah, I could jump in with an example, Steph. I think there's, as Thea touched on, there's so many different kind of aspects that you'd need to investigate with managing labour effectively. I think some examples of businesses that do seem to be doing it well are that they, I guess, have probably layers of, maybe not layers, but they might employ specific people, say team leaders or actual management, to ensure that that labour is being managed efficiently. So it's having, as opposed to it being someone who manages, the growing and then the labour side of it together, it's actually having, a specific harvesting manager, a specific packing shed manager, and thinking strategically about that whole system to be able to try and improve efficiency through that as well. And that has been an example from one grower who I think had, I guess, invested in terms of it hiring a labour manager, and that was an additional cost, but with the hope and it'd be interesting to see whether this has borne fruit, but with the aim that it would improve that labour efficiency and actually get greater income from it over time.
Yep. Anything else to add there? Yep.
Yeah, well, because Jake mentioned it at the start of this webinar, which is really good, where a grower he'd been working with was knowing their numbers around, which crop to grow and the yields. The same, what we see is with the most profitable growers, they do the same thing with labour as well. So many of them actually know how much their staff should be performing, how many units they should be packing, for example, or picking per minute. And those are some really extreme examples but they're really effective in the sense that those growers actually are able to be really efficient and productive and churn out many more units than other growers might.
Probably another one, Thea, that I just remembered was, and it's in the benchmark report, we got some data this year on labour retention and how that varied between the growers in each profitability group. And it wasn't I don't know if it's a significant kind of finding, but it definitely, the growers who were in the most profitable group had more better labour retention year on year compared to the other groups too. So that really does show the importance of obviously, once you've trained people, generally they're going to be more efficient workers, and if you can keep them for longer, that goes a long way. And so that then gets into your training and your team culture and how well you look after your staff, perhaps paying them more than the award as an example. They're all factors that go into it.
And I think to Jake and Thea, the cumulative benefit of that is that being able to get management type level in there to manage staff and a group of staff and team members is the impact it has on management or ownership's ability to actually put their mind space into somewhere else. So the ability to actually take on some of the decisions around marketing or contracting or contracts or something like that and put more effort and time and headspace into that. That is where we're seeing across Australia the implementation of that management type level that you're talking about takes that worry and time away from the owners in the business of doing that and allows them to put effort into something else. And some of that effort might be personal and into family. That's got a benefit as well. So it might not necessarily always be money.
Thanks, guys. Interesting question. A new question is, what's one metric every grower should know, but most don't track closely enough?
For your profit margin, of course. Yeah, your profit margin just tells you essentially how effectively you're converting those costs that you're spending into income.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Thea. It's the clearest indication of everyone's got different crops that they're growing, and so the indicator of actual dollar profit per hectare might not be a fair benchmark for those who are growing crops that are less gross profit per hectare, but it's about looking at that actual profit margin. So that's what I sit down and look at and really run through with the Tassie growers that I deal with.
Yeah, and you could have a really high income earning business, but if you have really high costs associated with that, then you're going to have a low margin. That's why we see such a huge variation throughout the data set. There's no trend around how much income growers are generating as to where they're positioned in the data set, because there's also some that are really low income earning growers, but they also have a really low cost associated with that cost of production. So their profit margin is much larger as a result.
Great, thank you. This is another question we have. Have you observed any change in the common factors for profitable businesses over the years? And it's a really interesting question, isn't it?
Repeat.
Have you observed any change in the common factors for profitable businesses over the years? I would sort of hazard a guess that, you know, a lot of the traits that you listed earlier on in the slides there that profitable businesses demonstrate are pretty commonplace, not only in vegetables, but any industry you look at. And Plant Farm and RMCG have both been benchmarking for decades. We see very similar traits in nearly every business sector in agriculture. So timing of applications, forming strong relationships with buyers and suppliers. I don't know if you want to put the slide up there. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but knowing your numbers and basing decision making on sound assumptions and solid numbers.
Yeah, I'd agree with that,
Yep.
Steph. I don't think I've seen necessarily any change in it. I guess particularly with labour becoming, like, obviously with the growers who grow more labour intensive crops, I think managing labour is obviously another, like if you can manage that effectively and have good systems in place for that, I think that's probably another, probably becoming more and more important as well.
And I'd also add in, there's so much around attitude and mindset as well. So those, obviously we understand that conditions are really hard, but what we're seeing is those that are still profitable are the ones that are actually really willing. So that last point, having willingness to improve, they're actually really out there looking for where are those 1%ers, because they really want it.
I think
Thank
the
you.
one, the step,
you're
I
right.
mean, just say the one that I think we can see has improved is just the integrity of the data. So if you take the last 5 to 7 years, you know, the time taken to do a administration and finance job 7 years ago is probably taking 3 to 4 times now with red tape and the things that have been put on producers and growers. So, but what I've noticed personally, and you can see it in the data, is growers that are always the most successful, most profitable have continued, or their data integrity is strong. So I think, you know, we've seen a plethora of cash books where you can find anything from the point of a crop type and the costs against that in all types of the costs to a cash book that has everything all and sundry, and you wouldn't know where to find or how to split out an enterprise. So you get this large range of data and quality of data. And I think that has been the change, I reckon, in the last 3 to 5 years, particularly the last 3, that even though the red tape and that compliance that's come into the industry has made things a lot tougher from an admin and finance perspective, those that are doing it really well have a better set of financial books like that you can actually interrogate.
And we'll probably see as carbon reporting comes in, things reporting and access to information and information flow within businesses will just step up to that next level again.
And I think that
across
relates
multiple
to
businesses areas. Sorry, Jake.
No, you're right. Yeah, I think that relates, exactly to what we were mentioning earlier in terms of, you know, the better performers generally just have a better grasp on their numbers. And so, you know, having good data means that you're able to have better data to be able to know your numbers and to be able to make your decisions, you know, based on better information, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Another question that we received before the webinar, so this one was done on registration. How much direct costs is within management's control, which we kind of touched on it within the, within the webinar. How many of those direct costs are within management's control, or should we say influence?
To a degree, you have influence over all of your costs because, you know, there's examples where, you know, growers can bulk buy because fertilizer might be too expensive, or working with other growers to get bulk produce. So yes, while there are costs that are increasing that can feel like it's out of your control, there's definitely ways that you can influence how, you know, how effectively you actually consume those in your business.
Yeah, we heard a really good example the other day of a bunch of growers working together to buy fertilizer in the current climate because fertilizer had increased. So they were actually pooling their buying power and getting fertilizer at a discounted rate by buying in bulk. So Yeah, I think it's a matter of how much you think outside the box, isn't it? Okay, we've got a few more questions. We could take a couple more, or we could respond to those in the emails. I'm conscious of time. I think there was another question about how does benchmarking help identify hidden opportunities to improve business performance? I think you covered a bit of that earlier, Jake. I don't know if anyone would like to elaborate on how it actually uncovers. I'm not sure if this is about the process or whether it's more about cost structures.
Yeah, I mean, it's different for each grower, and everyone's got different systems. But I think, it's kind of, as you said, there's the element of actually the benchmark and comparing costs to other growers can kind of, it's a bit of a magnifying glass. It gives you an area to look into where you might be a bit different, and so that's worthwhile looking into to work out, well, hang on, why is that the case, and is there anything I can do differently to improve this? But it's also the actual process and the process of reviewing year on year and looking at that data year on year to be able to kind of identify trends, and just the one-on-one conversational brainstorming element to it. So yeah, it is both the actual benchmarking comparison, but the actual one-on-one independent kind of look at your business that can kind of uncover some of those areas of opportunity too. And I guess we can kind of lean on our understanding of other businesses. Obviously, we don't ever reveal confidential information, but just to kind of have an understanding of how, some might, look into things differently.
Yeah. And when you're looking at industry benchmarks as well, because there's so many different crop types involved in there, it's about understanding it in the context of your own business, as Jake mentioned. So if you look at that and you see that your yields, that your yields aren't as high as they should be for your particular crop type, but then if you compare to the benchmarks and you see you're way underspending in some of your inputs, such as fertilizer and chemical, then maybe that's where an opportunity is, where you can actually say, all right, maybe we should be spending more, and then that's going to help improve our saleable yield at the other end. But it's about, bringing it back to your crop, understanding how does your crop fit into this, because there might be some costs that are specifically related to your crop that other growers don't experience.
Okay, we're just going to, there's one final question, which I think is a great question, so I can't ignore it, which is, how about the management of cash flow of the vegetable growers in general? What strategies would you recommend? Obviously, that depends on the individual business, but in general, generally speaking, guys, we know that cash flow is fairly under a lot of pressure at the moment. And I just wonder if anyone has any light to shed around that in terms of what growers should be looking at now. End of financial year, great timing to be thinking about this sort of thing and planning ahead for the next 6 to 12 months with their cash flow.
Yeah, I probably don't have anything specific to add, Steph, other than to plan ahead, as you said. Particularly in Tassie, there's growers can kind of find it difficult through the summer months before any income starts coming in. So it's planning ahead and knowing if there is going to be a shortfall in those months, thinking about what options you have available to manage it, basically.
Yep. I can add too, Steph, I think that across all industries, cash is king, and cash flow management is a key focus of the banking industry at the moment in terms of what does our cash flow look like if we've come off a tough year. If you've if you're in an ending position that is worse than where you started at the same time last year, then you're going to need to reborrow that money to put the crop in again. So your peak debt effect will be significant. And it's just forecasting out what that looks like under the best assumptions you can. And that's the key to cash flow management, is what are the assumptions that underpin revenue and costs, and how do I get to those? And then how do I actually make decisions around how I'll affect that, and what does my effect look like in terms of my peak debt and the periods that is. So I think the banking fraternity a few years have been very good at being proactive, and I think growers should be because certainly from a bank manager's point of view, if you put yourself in their seat, they would like to know what's happening a long way out versus knowing in retrospect as to, oh, geez, we've run out of money and all of a sudden I need some next month. So cash flow management is absolutely critical, I think, in any business. Not something that the vegetable and / horticulture industry have done a lot of, generally speaking, because there's always been consistent revenue and cash flow. But it's really tough now with increased costs and where they're at. So cash flow management, if there's anything that any business could do tomorrow to improve their business, a cash flow and regular monitoring of that, not just put it in the top drawer, but at least a quarterly monitoring of where we're at, how we're going budget to actuals. Is that seasonal effect? Is it price effect? What does it do for the forecast next roll of the budget? So all of those impacts are significant, and the more proactive you can be with your bank, the better.
And as part of the Level Up Hort program, participants receive a management report. How does that help negotiate with their bank, when they're having those conversations with the bank, because we're presenting the profit results for the year just gone. So how does that help with their cash flow in terms of being able to reborrow?
So the management reporting is significant because all around the profit of the year of effort. So the year of effort of production season is what we're analysed through the Level Up Hort project, and that report provides part of the story. The rest of the story that growers should be encouraged to do is have a cash flow that sits alongside that. So personally, and I think RMCG and Jake and the clients that he works with privately, if you provide a management report from Plan Farm, it will include a cash flow budget going forward and then regular monitoring of that to provide actuals to budget for the bank. So ultimately that report, that management report with profit, cash flow and balance sheet all alongside each other is all a bank manager needs to analyse a business's facilities and where they're actually structured right with the facilities they've got, or do they need to change them.
Perfect. Well, that's a great note to finish on. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Apologies if we didn't get to your question, but we will attempt to answer those directly to you later on. Please bear in mind, as Thea mentioned, we have some roadshow events coming up in August and September in every state of Australia. So if you're interested in drilling down a bit more into your margin, then please come along and attend. If you'd like a copy of the benchmark report, get in touch with one of your Level Up Hort consultants or head to our website, leveluphort.com.au. And if you would require any more information, please reach out to me. And thank you for joining us. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Thea. And thanks, Paul, for your input. It was fantastic. Thank you very much.